Hi, and welcome to Tanesha's Tips.
Said it's Tanesha's tip, coming all three speakers. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured. They all getting featured. Said it's Tanesha's tip, coming all three speakers. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured. Yeah. It's your girl Tanesha, straight magic. The greatest book reviews, let's get at it. She not here to offend, she just honest. Bringing reads that may leave you astonished. And plus she do shows. She cover all like hands, knees, and toes. Don't lollygag, no, she just roll. Then it's on to the next one, on to a fresh one. Said it's on to the next one, on to a fresh one. Tanesha's tip, coming all three speakers. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured. Said it's Tanesha's tip, coming all three speakers. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured. Yeah. Hey. It ain't for the clout, it's honest. See the truth when you look beyond it. Book shows, not to mention movies. She give or take in a great way, you'll see. Check it out, see if you agree. If you vibe, yes, it's meant to be. And baby, you don't even need the script. Learn it all with Tanesha's tips. Tanesha's tip, coming all three speakers. Yeah. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured.
Today, we're going to review episode 2, season 1, Reasonable Doubt. And the name of this title is Family Feud. So we left off with Jax finding out that Kalisha is no longer with us. So it actually picks up where it left off. And again, it says, she says, Kalisha's, gone. And then it clicks to the news reporter, announcing that Kalisha Moore was found deceased in her house, and just giving like the specifics that they give to the news, that whole interview type thing where they breaking news, you know what I mean? So as they're doing that, then it pans to the police officers, and they're like scanning the area and trying to figure out, exactly what happened. So they happen to see two people on the side grieving, and so they walk up to them and they say, hey, are you related to the deceased? And they both say yeah. And so they ask the man, they say, well, whom are you? And he's like, I'm her husband. Now y'all know last episode, anybody know she was married because of the way she was moving, but apparently she was married. He said, yes, I'm her husband, I'm Ryan Moore. We were separated, but I was moving back in next week. And so then they moved to the lady and they said, okay, so are you related to her too? And were you the person that found her? And she was like, yes, I'm her cousin. And I came over to prepare her for a Good Morning America interview that she had coming up. And when I got here, she was already gone, already resting well, should I say. So then next clip, it's Braden, and he was getting a call from Rich, who told him, hey, Kalisha is no longer with us. Now, Braden get this information. He was like, wait, what? Like, he can't believe it, right? So if he got something to do with it, he playing a part, right? So he says, yes, and the police will probably come over there to interview you. So make sure you don't say anything to them until myself and Jax get there. He's like, Jax, why she coming, basically? And I'm like, oh, goodness, he's still on his BS, right? And I'm like, did he not think that she told him that the last time he checked that SA was a criminal charge, but now she ain't with us no more. So obviously it's a criminal charge, right? Or it's a crime. So she needs to be there. Anyway, that's not here or there. We get to the next clip. And this is Jax, and she's preparing for, work. She's curling her hair, and then she has a little flashback of when she had her last encounter with Kalisha, which was when, she ran into her at the elevator. And just her look, she, the words weren't passed, but just the way Kalisha looked, her eyes, and, her looking distressed. So also remembering what she said, next time a black woman says, something happened, you need to show up. Listen, point taken. You should have showed up, which honestly she did, but she got booted or whatever, and she was kind of on the other side of the team. But anyway, she was there at first. So anyway, Jax gets ready and she's on her way out the door, and all of a sudden she hears Jax. And so she looks around and she's like, what is this in my house? Y'all, it's Will. He over there trying to make breakfast like he Chef Boyardee or somebody. Now, I thought that they was done and he had left that night because she was clearly in the bed by herself. Apparently, he didn't get the hint because he in the doggone kitchen cooking. And she said, I thought you was already gone. What's going on? I got to leave and I got somewhere to go. He was like, oh, I just wanted to make you breakfast and get to know you. Or something else he said. We building to get to know each other. And I'm like, sir, that was supposed to be your last day. What happened. It was over, right? I guess he did not get that memo. But anyway, she pushed him out the door. And basically when she closed the door, she was like, whew, child. I was like, whew, child. Well, she gonna have to handle that because that is crazy. So anyway, next clip, it's Rich, and as he stated, it's basically Brayden, but as Rich stated, the police did come over to interview Brayden. And when they came in, Brayden was actually talking to Theo, which is his partner. And they were like, hey, can we talk to you? And he was like, yeah, go ahead. And they were like, no, can we talk to you in private? He said, well, anything you can say to me, you can say to Theo. Some kind of way to get Theo to leave, whatever. Theo left. So then they sit down or whatever. And he said, well, I really don't want to talk to you without my counsel. They were like, oh, we're not interrogating you. We're just going to, ask you some simple questions or whatever to lead us in the right direction. And so he was like, okay. So anyway, the question that they asked was, how well did you know her? And he was like, yeah, she's, very neat and organized or whatever. And we talked quite a bit. And they were like, that's not what we were talking about. That's a great letter of recommendation, something to say. And I was like, ooh. They was like, well, how well did you know her inside and outside of work? And as soon as they said that, that's when Jax came in. And she said, oh, I see y'all already started. Did he ever tell y'all that he wanted to his council president? And nobody said anything. He said, yeah, I told them that. And she said, yeah, y'all kept going. Let me show y'all to the door. I said, okay, girl, now put your foot down, okay? So anyway, she let them go in front of her. However, she looked back at Brayden like, yeah, I see you. She gonna have to see him because he is something else. So as Jax walks him out, then Rich comes up and he's like, oh, sorry, I'm late. What happened? And so she was telling him, hey, he, they tried to basically, interrogate him as, while we weren't there. And, yeah, it's not my business or whatever, but, I'm not going to give commentary. I don't give commentary for clients that's not mine. And so he was like, well, why wouldn't you? And she was like, I don't give commentary on assholes. And he was like, well, since when, you let somebody's personality, I guess, get in the way. And so as he was saying that, basically Brayden walked up and he says, well, where do we go from here? And she was like, well, you direct any questions or anything you have to Rich. And he was like, what do you mean? She was like, that's your attorney of choice. And she walks off. And I'm like, that is true. So anyway, he's sitting there looking dumbfounded, and Rich kind of like, okay. And then we move on to the next scene. Mama Lou shows up at Lewis's house. Apparently, she's doing him a favor by taking the kids to school because he has to go pick up his brother and his partner because they're coming into town. But before she takes the kids, she has to let him know that, hey, you need to take care of your marriage before something that could be fixed, it goes unfixed or something like that. Basically, she basically trying to get in his business and tell him what to do, give him some marital advice. So that was that, and Lewis looking like, oh God, here we go. Anyway, so then it jumps to the next scene with Crystal and Jax. And Jax comes in and asks Crystal, hey, do you have any nicotine? And she was like, yeah, I got your back. Anything but them nasty cigarettes or whatever. And she was like, oh, girl, whatever. And so she was like telling Crystal that, I'm not taking Brayden's case. And she was like, good, because he did it. And she said, how you know he did it? She was like, well, everything points to him or whatever. And she was like, I'm not believing that until I see everything that they have. And so she tells her to throw the folder away, and she said, "You're gonna take the case or whatever." And then it just jumps to another scene, which is back at Lewis and his brother. So I guess his brother is like some kind of musical person or whatever, and he was, at the end of his session of rehearsing, and he's like, "Boo," that whole brother thing or whatever. And so his brother came in and he was like, "Well, don't boo me or whatever, but I hope to see you and Jax at the the show." And he said, "Well, Jax won't be there." And he was like, "Well, why?" "Oh, she has a work thing." He was like, "Oh no." And so then he says that his partner is supposed to come, so he'd rather it be the four of them instead of him being the third wheel. And he was like, "Oh, okay." Instead of saying, we are separated. I guess he didn't want to tell his brother that. So now his brother's excited because Jax is gonna come. Anyway, I'm with the son. Jax is kind of a good time. I just like her personality. So anyway, now we get to the next scene where Jax is meeting up with the DA Ortiz, and she's asking him, "Have you heard of the case or whatever?" He was like, "Oh, the guy that's been all in the case, all in the news or whatever, and now one of the people that work for him is, deceased." And she was like, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but why are you here? I thought Rich was on the case." And she said, "He is." And she says, "Well, I'm just here being a team player." And he said, "The only time you're involved in something is if you think you can win." And so she just smiled at him or whatever. And then someone came in to say that they were ready for Ortiz, whatever he had going on. So now she gets a phone call or whatever, and it's telling her that it's from Daniel, which is the investigator. And he's telling her that they found some evidence that Braden was in Kalicia's house the night of the murder. And she was also asking, well, why did they just interview Braden? Why didn't they interview anybody else? And they said, "Well, we did. We interviewed her husband or whatever, and he was at some kind of work event in Paloma with 60 other people witnessing him, and it's on his social media pictures and everything. So I guess they can't pin it on him." So now with this evidence that it was some things found with Braden's fingerprints or whatever on there, it shows that he was also at the scene of the crime on the night that she went to sleep. Okay, so then it pans to Braden, and he's reminiscing about Kalisha. He comes up the stairs, and all of a sudden he's having a flashback of Kalisha and the last time that he made it to her door. I guess that was the last night. So then it pans to Jax and Rich having a conversation, and she asks him, "Hey, did you know that Braden actually came over to Kalisha's house the night unaliving?" And he was like, "Yeah, I knew that." But he was also asking, "Well, what interest do you have in this case? You said you didn't want to do it." So she says, "Well, I just want to know, yeah." She said, "Well, I don't have any interest on being in the case, and Braden don't want me on either. So, it's the same thing, but I just wanted to know if you knew." And so Rich says, "Yes, he does want you to be on the case because he now needs a great criminal defense attorney, and you're a great one." And she was like, well, just like that. And so she leaves. Then that evening, Jax meets up with her friends, whatever. It was supposed to be a girls' night, but two of them were late, work and other things or whatever. But they end up showing up. Her friend asked her, "How's it going with Lewis?" And she kind of giggles or whatever. And she was like, "Well, I'm good." And she was like, "Oh, was it Lewis?" And she was like, "No." She said, "Well, listen, I'm not here to judge. That's your business," or whatever. Anyway, the other two girls end up coming over, and they end up having a crazy girls conversation about munches and stuff like that. So if you know what a munchie is, then So it was a really interesting, funny conversation. Then all of a sudden, Jax gets a text message. And in this text message is from Rich. It says, Braden is going to give you a call. And I guess from the look on her face, her friends was like, why is she looking like that or whatever. And so she decides to go ahead and let them know that, I don't want to give attorney-client privilege away or whatever, but my firm is representing a big-time case, and the guy didn't want me at first, and now all of a sudden he wants me. And she kind of gave a little synopsis or whatever. And so they were like, well, did he do it? And she like, well, I don't know if he did it or not or whatever. So anyway, she's like, I'm not trying to do it or whatever, but whatever. And so they finish up, start the conversation about munches again. And then it goes to the next morning, and Jax is coming down the stairs, and she finds her family down there. She's like, oh, So I guess they were supposed to meet her at church, but apparently they end up at the house. And she's like, well, what are you guys doing here? Well, Lewis says, no, Spencer left his Bible, so we came by to get it or whatever. And she was like, oh, okay. So anyway, they all gather together and they go to church. As they're entering the church, the pastor comes by with another lady, and he's like, hey, Jax, I was just telling our fellow parishioner or whatever that, she could get some help from you since you're an attorney. She's going through a traumatic experience with her family, the Stevens family. And so when it pans to her, it's actually Fallon, which is Kalicia's cousin. And Fallon says, no, we don't need to use her because she's actually his attorney. And so Jack says, no, I'm not his attorney. It's my firm that's representing him. However, I would be happy to give you a referral. I was like, okay, then, girl. I'm telling you, she be coming with these clapbacks, right? And so she said that, and she walked off. So anyway, that was just crazy. I'm like, wow. Got the pastor all up in this stuff. So anyway, so in the church, Jax, as she's sitting down, she actually sees Damon Cook. And she looking like, all panicked and everything. And then she looks over to her daughter and try to give this fake smile. And I guess that appeases her daughter because nothing happens. So then outside of the church, Lewis comes, behind her. And he's like, hey, what are you doing this evening? And she's like, what? And she was like, nothing. He was like, hey, would you like to go to Terrence's show tonight? Terrence is his brother. And she was like, oh, he's in town. I would go, whatever. And so he said, okay, great. We'll drop the kids off at Mama Lou and Paul's house. And she was like, no, how about we have Mama Lou come over to your house and take care of the kids. And then you can take me home after the show. And they were like, okay, I guess that's the compromise. Now, because Jax does not really fool with Paul, and we kind of seen that from the beginning. It was something that was going on, and the way she actually looked at him and kind of distanced herself, and then at the mention of his name and not wanting the kids to go over there, something happened. You ain't gonna tell me, something happened. So anyway, we fast forward to that night, and Jax and Lewis is eating with Terrence and Jason. They're actually partners. They're married. And Terrence being the brother-in-law, and Jason being the husband. So I guess Jax was telling them about her encounter with Spencer that morning or that evening or whatever, and how they got into it because she told them to be in the bed by 9:30 and not to have cake before bed. And so Spencer was like, we can have cake before bed. Dad said it's his house, it's the rules or whatever. And so the dad jumped in and said, no. The parent who says no, it goes, right? And so his son looking at him like, well, now you trying to switch up on us or whatever. Anyway, so Terrence was on Jackson's side that he's a little asshole or whatever. And so she was like, see, I'm glad you're on my side and you see it the way I see it or whatever. And so they just cackle or whatever. And so then he looks over at them. He's like, I'm glad you guys are working out because we wouldn't know what to do. I don't think we would be able to live if we weren't together. So they give this little crazy look because they both know that they ain't really together, right? They just putting on airs. So anyway, Terrence seen it, but then he kind of let it go. And so then they kind of cackled a little bit, and then Terrence gets on stage and he decides, okay, I'm going to dedicate this song to my brother and his and my sister in love, right? Because this is what we say nowadays. And so then he's singing this little song, and then it pans to Braden. He reminiscing about Kalisha, and then it goes back to Damon, and he looking off in space, and then it goes to Lewis and Jax, right? So then all throughout this whole thing, they're singing this song, and Braden now all of a sudden he picks up the picture frame, and it's him, Theo, and Kalisha on this picture. And I'm like, oh, now you reminiscing, but at first you was trying to get her to sign an NDA and keep your little traipsing whatever you was doing a secret. Ooh. Make it make sense. Anyway, it never does. So anyway, it goes back to Lewis them or whatever, Lewis and Jax, and they sitting there listening to the music and everything and him singing it. Jax says, "Oh God, I'm not coming to another one of these. I feel like I'm in like a fishbowl and everybody looking at me and I'm looking like I feel like Sunshine Anderson." Heard it all before. Y'all know the song. Anyway, so they start cackling about it or whatever. They end up leaving and he's taking her home. They're outside and here he go trying to woo her or whatever. One thing leads to another and then they having bang bang on the side of the or in the house, or at least they start. Then they get to the couch and the whole scene that happened with Will the other day, he tries to get her to recreate that or whatever. She looks up in the corner and sees that camera. She knew he was watching her, which we kind of knew that because she was making eyes at the camera when she was doing it. But anyway, they throw their mess up in each other's face and he makes it known that she did this before and this and the third. And she said that you only want me on your terms. And he said, you only want me on your terms. And she said, well, I told you we need counseling or whatever the case may be. Anyway, ain't nothing happened because she was like, you can go or whatever, which I know, right? I mean, if it's got to be that complicated, then why are y'all together and why are we doing this? This is just so, like, I feel like I am traumatized. I'm more confused than kids. Anyway, so then they go and they flip back to the kids, and the kids are sharing a room over at Lewis's house, obviously, because it's temporary residence, right? And it's his week to have kids. So she, Naima walks in the room, and Spencer closes his laptop quickly, and she said, why, when I walked in, you closed your laptop or whatever? He was like, because I'm finished. And she was like, ooh, you was looking at nasty pictures. You know how little girls do or whatever, little sisters or whatever. He was like, whatever. And so then she asked him, you know, hey, do you think mom and dad are going to get a divorce? And he was like, nah. And so she said, well, I heard them arguing the other day and it seemed really bad. And so he was looking like, oh, goodness. But he was like, no, I didn't hear it, so I don't think so. And so she was just like, okay. And so she let it go. And then he opens his laptop again and we see that he got a D on his math exam or something. And it said something about tomorrow. I don't know. I didn't read it really, whatever. But I was like, oh, see, your little bad self was on that game instead of doing your work. But ain't nobody mama. So there you go. Okay, so Lewis makes it home. And of course, Mama Lou is like, what you doing here? You know, I told y'all to stay out. And he was like, she was like, did y'all have an argument? He said it went well until it didn't. And here she go. And she want to meddle in their business or whatever, right? We already know this is what she does. So anyway, so he says, I don't want to talk about it or whatever. So she lets it go. And we're thinking, okay, this is the end of it. No. Mama Lou shows up at Jack's house. And so when Jax answered the door, she said, hey, what's going on? Is everybody okay? She was like, calm down, everybody okay. I was talking to Lewis and he was saying that X, Y, and Z. And she said, so are you his defense lawyer or whatever? She said, every time I turn around, it seems like you're his spokesperson and you over here speaking for him. And she's like, no, I just want y'all to fix it and this and the third. And she says, you know, you always defending him. But, and she was like, you act like I wasn't a good mother. Boy, when I tell you, Mama Lou is all about that manipulation. Girl, let it go. Let it go. And you could tell that, I guess, Jax has a feeling about some certain things. And she was like, she took a breath and she was like, okay, we just gonna try to deflect. And she was like, I didn't say that, Mom. And so they end up hugging or whatever and end scene. I swear, things be said and then they don't be wanting the truth and it just leads to one thing and it's just like, oh God, leave it alone. Please leave it alone. Anyway, so moving on, Jack stops by Rich's office and she's asking questions about the case or whatever. And Rich is like, hey, are you asking as my co-counsel or what? And she was like, I'm asking as a citizen. And so he asked her, you know, do you think he's guilty? She says, well, I think that, you know, he could be lying or, you know, but there's more to the story. And so he was like, yeah, that could be. So anyway, we pan over and Fallon is on the phone with Jax. And Jax is giving her the referral that she told her in church that she would give her. And it seems like they come to an impasse or whatever. But one thing that Fallon said that I was like, you know what? They actually agree on this. And she says, she's sick of black women defending black men who don't deserve it. Now, that's the exact way that Jax felt when she was talking to her mom, but she didn't say it. And being on the phone, she was like, yeah. And so Fallon also said, I can't believe you used to be a public defender. And she said, once a public defender, always a public defender. And she was like, okay. She was like, I'm sorry I can't do more or whatever. And Fallon was like, no, actually you've done a lot or whatever, and I really appreciate it, whatever. So it seemed like they came to terms and they was going to be on good, everything was all good. So once Jax gets off the phone with Fallon, she ends up meeting up with Damon at a coffee shop. He tells her, get anything you want, I'm paying for it or whatever. Okay, big spender out of jail. Okay, let's go ahead. So anyway, they go up to the counter and he orders a black coffee with milk. And the lady was like, what kind of milk? And he said, milk. She said, almond, coconut, cashew, all the milks or whatever. And then he was like, yeah, that's fine, right? And then he said, never mind, just black coffee. And she says, well, what kind of roast? And he looked at Jackson. He was like, what does that mean? And so the girl says, light roast, dark roast, medium roast, cold coffee, whatever, cold brew. I was like, oh, he just looked at her. And so Jackson was like, he'll have Americano and I'll have something she ordered. I can't remember. And so when she walks off, he said, well, since when do you have to fill out a questionnaire for coffee? And she was like, yeah, she made it extra complicated and she knew what you meant, but she just wanted to go, But technically, it is like filling out a questionnaire just to get coffee. When you go to Starbucks and Dunkin', it's like, I want 2 squirts of this and this and this. And I'm like, it's a lot. It really is. You have to have all this stuff written down because unless you go daily, it's like speaking a whole different language. Anyway, ain't nobody asked me. So they end up taking their coffee on the beach and they end up having a discussion, and Damon ends up telling her, the reason why I said that I end up confessing to something that I didn't do was because I was having a panic attack in jail and I kept thinking about coming to the beach, and it's somewhere that's 5 minutes away from where I was, but yet I couldn't get there, and I just thought I was going to pass away in jail without seeing the beach. He said, I just didn't want that to happen. So then he was like, she was just telling him, I, hate that I didn't win the case for you or whatever. And he said, no, you fought for me and you're a fighter or whatever. And you fought harder than anybody has ever fought. And he said, they didn't make the law for us, but he said they made it for us to lose. And he said, but Jax, you're a winner, right? Winner, chicken dinner. Anyway, she ends up like fiddling with her ring and looking down at it. And he was like, oh, I'm glad you're happy or whatever. And she was just kind of like, yeah. Which we already know what the deal is with them. They just own some kind of whatever. But anyway, all that happens. They still say a little bit and flirt a little bit. And he tells her to think about some things. And she was like, I'll think about it. And then she ends up leaving. As she gets to the car, Jax makes a phone call. And she ends up making a phone call to Brayden. And when he picks up the phone, she asks him, did you are Kalisha? And he was like, no. And he explained his side of the story. And she asked him again. She was like, well, what happened? He said, my truth is no, but obviously her truth is yes. He said, so I'm just as confused as you and don't know why she said that, but it's making me look as if I was the one that did it. And so she said that, she's going to take on his case or whatever. And he's so surprised. And he's like, what made you change your mind? And she said, I reserve the right to change my mind when I want to. That's on period. But anyway, so she also says that, I reserve the right to change my mind, but you need me, which that's true too. So anyway, back at the office, Jax enters her office or whatever, and Crystal's coming up, and she asked her, how was court? She was like, oh, I lost. And she was like, what? And she was like, it's like I did. And she said, but I'm about to take on a new client or whatever, so I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And she said, let me guess, it's Braden Miller. And so she was like, how'd you know? And she just handed her the folder that she had told her previously to tear up. But remember, Crystal said, you're going to take on his case. So she knew that or whatever. So anyway, Rich ends up coming in after all that happens or whatever. He's got this smirk on his face and he's like, I'm so happy that you're on the case with me or whatever, but be ready to go to the police station tonight because I set it up with them. At least they called us. And she was like, why would you do that? You know, he's gonna call the press or whatever, and they have an ulterior motive to it too or whatever. And so he says, well, you know, it would be good. She was saying that we should, you know, all ride together. He said, well, I did try to call Braden, but he's not answering, and Theo don't know where he's at or whatever. And so they decide that, oh goodness, we got to go get him. Hopefully he's not running because we need to find out where exactly he went. So they end up going to the office and they run into Theo. They ask Theo, you know, where's Braden? Theo says Braden took the day off or whatever. And he was like, but I don't know where he's at. And they were like, okay. And so she said, well, you go to the police station. I'm going to go get Braden. At that same time, Daniel had called and said that he had his whereabouts, but he was way across town. So that's what they end up doing. They end up splitting up on the way to go get Braden. Jax called the police station and let them know that they're running late. And obviously the police like, he's not running his end. She was like, no, we just need some extra time. So anyway, she gets across town and Braden is playing basketball of all things, right? And you're thinking, now you're supposed to be at the police station, but you over here shooting hoops. And she asked him, well, why are you here? And he says, you know, I come over here to, you know, think. He said, I never took up golf or anything. I couldn't understand it or whatever, which, okay, I get you. So then he starts telling her how, you know, he grew up with his little brother, and because he did a shot and she said, you're good. And he said, no, my little brother was actually better. But anyway, his brother was taller and really fast and good or whatever. But he ended up getting shot in the neck or whatever. And as he was waiting on the paramedics to get there, he ended up, you know, being deceased as well. And he ended up watching him, you know. So she was like, oh, no, I'm sorry to hear that or whatever. And so anyway, then one thing led to her and him talking about, you know, his wife. And he, you know, it's cliche to marry a white lady, a black man to marry a white lady. But he said that Sarah, which is the wife, was with him when he didn't have anything. So he married her and she's a great wife and mother, right? And so she looked at him and she was like, but you love Kalisha, huh? And so without really saying much, it was a yes. And so he said, have you ever looked at anybody and you couldn't breathe or something like that? And she was like, no, which that was a yes, because that's the way she looked at Damon, right? Anyway, we both know that. So anyway, fast forward, they end up going to the police station. When they make it there, obviously it's like a whole press junket and they taking pictures and doing everything. And so he bypassed the cameras. Rich meets him and leads him, and then she's behind him, and she turns around when she makes it up to the stairs and she tells them, listen, y'all have him pegged as the assailant, and he hasn't done anything. He's innocent until proven guilty, and had this whole speech. All the while, Fallon sees this and she's looking like, this bitch, and she said it at the end, and then it went off. So that wraps up episode 2. So now we'll see what happens in episode 3. But it's getting juicy. The story is evolving. But yeah, that's the end of this review. I will be happy to hear your comments. Please let me know what you think. I want you to like, subscribe, comment, do everything, because I need you guys to view it. But see you next time.
And plus she do shows. She cover all like hands, knees, and toes. Don't lollygag, no, she just rolls. Then it's on to the next one, on to a fresh one. Woo. Ha. Said it's on to the next one, on to a fresh one. Tanesha's tip, coming all 3 speakers. Good honest reviews, book shows, and the movies all getting featured.